The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on Olivia Zimmerman as she stumbled across the dusty plains of Wyoming Territory, 1879, her torn shoes barely holding together and her bloodied feet leaving faint crimson imprints in the dirt behind her. The promise of marriage that had lured her across the country had turned into a nightmare, and now she was running for her life, 1,000 miles from anything she could call home. Olivia's chest heaved with labored breaths as she forced herself to keep moving. 3 days ago, she had fled in the dead of night from the home of Arnold Weathers, the man she had traveled from Boston to marry. The advertisement in the newspaper had painted him as a successful rancher looking for a bride to share his prosperous life. What the advertisement failed to mention was his violent temper, the stench of whiskey that perpetually clung to him, and the fact that his idea of a wife was little more than an unpaid servant to be beaten at will. The first blow had come just hours after her arrival. The second followed shortly after when she had dropped a plate while serving his dinner. By the third day, Olivia had formulated her escape plan, taking nothing but the clothes on her back and a small pouch of coins she had managed to hide in the lining of her dress. Now, with the vast expanse of prairie stretching before her, she could only pray that the small town of Riverstone that she had heard Weathers mention was actually in the direction she was heading. Her throat was parched, her lips cracked, and the soles of her feet were raw and bleeding through her disintegrating shoes. "Just a little further," she whispered to herself, her voice hoarse from lack of water. "Just a little further." The horizon wavered in the heat, and Olivia blinked rapidly, trying to determine if the dark speck in the distance was real or just another mirage. She had been fooled twice already by what appeared to be buildings or trees, only to find empty air as she approached. But this time, the speck grew larger and took shape a rider on horseback, moving steadily in her direction. Fear clutched at her heart. Had Weathers sent someone after her? She glanced around frantically, but there was nowhere to hide on the open plain. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she forced herself to keep moving, veering slightly off her path in hopes of avoiding the oncoming rider. But the horseman had spotted her. He changed course, heading directly toward her. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. She couldn't run, her feet were too damaged, and even at full strength, she could never outpace a horse. She stopped, swaying on her feet, and reached down to pick up a rock. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all she had. As the rider drew closer, she could make out the broad shoulders, the Stetson hat pulled low over his forehead, and the weathered duster that marked him as a cowboy. He reined in his horse about 20 feet away, studying her with piercing blue eyes that stood out against his sun-bronzed face. "Madam," he called, his voice deep and cautious, "are you in need of assistance?" Olivia clutched the rock tighter, her hand trembling. "Stay back," she warned, her voice barely audible. The man tilted his head slightly, taking in her bedraggled appearance, the torn dress, and most notably, the blood that had seeped through what remained of her shoes. "I mean you no harm," he said, dismounting slowly, keeping his hands visible. "My name is Lucas Irwin. I work at the Double R Ranch about 10 miles east of here. You look like you could use some help." "I don't need help from any man," Olivia replied, though she swayed dangerously as she spoke. Lucas didn't move any closer. "That may be true, madam, but your feet seem to disagree." He nodded toward the ground. "You're bleeding pretty bad." Against her will, Olivia's eyes dropped to her feet. Through the haze of pain she had been ignoring, she could see that her stockings were soaked with blood, and small crimson puddles were forming where she stood. "I'm heading to Riverstone," she managed, refusing to acknowledge her condition. "Riverstone's still 15 miles west," Lucas said. "In your condition, you won't make 5. He reached for his canteen. "At least take some water." The mention of water broke through her defenses. Olivia's parched throat constricted painfully, and she found herself nodding before she could stop herself. Lucas approached slowly, like one might a wounded animal, and held out the canteen. Olivia snatched it from his hand, keeping the rock ready in her other, and drank deeply, the lukewarm water tasting sweeter than any fine wine she had ever sampled in Boston. "Thank you," she said reluctantly, handing the canteen back. "You're welcome, Miss Zimmerman, Olivia Zimmerman." Lucas nodded. "Miss Zimmerman, I can't in good conscience leave you out here. If you're set on Riverstone, I can take you there. Or there's a doctor at our ranch who could tend to your feet." Olivia hesitated. Trust didn't come easily, not after what she had just escaped, but neither did she have many options. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky, and she knew that night on the open prairie could be deadly, especially in her weakened state. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked plainly. Lucas considered her question seriously. "You don't," he admitted, "but I give you my word as a gentleman that I'll deliver you safely wherever you choose to go. And if that's not enough, I can ride ahead a bit while you follow, keeping your distance. That way you're in control." It was the honesty of his answer that swayed her. Arnold Weathers had been full of promises and smooth words. This cowboy offered her choice and acknowledged her fear. "I'll go with you to Riverstone," she said finally, dropping the rock. Lucas nodded, seeming to understand that this small concession had cost her greatly. "Let me help you onto the horse. Shadow here is gentle, and I'll walk alongside." Olivia allowed him to approach, though she tensed when his hands wrapped around her waist to lift her onto the saddle. Once seated, she couldn't suppress a sigh of relief as the pressure was finally removed from her tortured feet. "You're a mail-order bride, aren't you?" Lucas asked quietly as he took Shadow's reins and began to lead the horse westward. Olivia stiffened. "How did you know?" "Your accent isn't from around here, and your dress, though a bit worse for wear now, is too fine for these parts. And—" he hesitated. "We don't get many unaccompanied ladies wandering the prairie unless they're running from something or someone." Olivia didn't respond immediately, watching the steady rhythm of Lucas's shoulders as he walked. Finally, she said, "Yes, I answered an advertisement. It wasn't what was promised." Lucas's jaw tightened, but he simply nodded. "I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Zimmerman. There are good men in these parts, but there are plenty of the other kind too." "I've discovered that for myself," Olivia replied bitterly. They traveled in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the saddle, the soft thud of Shadow's hooves, and the occasional call of a prairie bird. Despite her caution, Olivia found herself relaxing slightly. There was something reassuring about Lucas Irwin's steady presence, the careful way he led the horse to avoid rough patches in the terrain, and the respectful distance he maintained in their conversation. "May I ask why Riverstone?" Lucas asked eventually. "Do you have family there?" Olivia shook her head. "I don't know anyone in Riverstone. I just overhead him. Mention it as the nearest town where a stagecoach passes through. I need to find work, save enough money for a ticket back east." Lucas glanced up at her. "Jobs for women are scarce out here, especially ones that pay enough for travel. Most work as laundresses, cooks, or in the saloons," Olivia finished for him. "I'm aware. I'll do what I must." A frown crossed Lucas's tanned face. There might be other options. "The Double R employs a schoolteacher for the rancher's children. The current one, Miss Harding, is leaving to be married next month." "I'm not a teacher," Olivia admitted. "I worked as a seamstress in Boston after my parents died. It was a good position, but the wages were barely enough to survive." When the advertisement promised a better life out west, she trailed off, the foolishness of her decision still raw. "Can you read and write?" Lucas asked. "Of course," Olivia replied, somewhat indignantly. My father was a bookbinder. Our home was full of books, and education was important to him. Lucas smiled slightly at her tone. Then you're already better qualified than half the teachers who come through these parts. Just something to consider. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Lucas stopped and looked up at Olivia. We won't reach Riverstone before dark. There's a creek about a mile ahead where we can make camp for the night. The water's clean, and there's shelter in a small grove of trees. Olivia tensed again. Spending the night alone with a man she had just met went against everything she had been taught about propriety. Yet the prospect of continuing to travel in the dark was equally daunting. Sensing her hesitation, Lucas said, "I'll keep my distance, Miss Zimmerman. You can have the bedroll and I'll sleep on the other side of the fire. But it's not safe to travel these plains at night. There are coyotes, snakes, and holes a horse can break a leg in." "Very well," Olivia agreed reluctantly. "But I want to be clear, Mr. Irwin. I have nothing to offer you in return for your help." A flash of something hurt, perhaps, or a fence crossed Lucas's face before his expression smoothed back into polite neutrality. "I'm not expecting anything, Miss Zimmerman. Helping someone in need is just what decent folks do out here. The prairie doesn't forgive those who turn their backs on others." Chastened, Olivia nodded. "I apologize. Recent experiences have made me cautious." "No apology needed," Lucas replied. "Your caution is well-founded. I'd be just as wary in your position." When they reached the creek, Lucas helped Olivia down from the horse, careful to support her weight so she wouldn't have to stand on her injured feet. He settled her on a flat rock near the water's edge before unsaddling Shadow and setting up a small camp with practiced efficiency. "May I examine your feet?" he asked once the fire was crackling cheerfully. "I'm no doctor, but I've dealt with my share of injuries on the ranch." Olivia hesitated, then nodded, extending her legs toward him. Lucas knelt before her and gently removed what remained of her shoes. She couldn't suppress a wince as dried blood made the material stick to her wounds. "This is going to hurt," he warned, retrieving his canteen and a clean kerchief from his saddlebag. "But we need to clean them before infection sets in." The pain as he carefully washed away the dirt and blood was excruciating, but Olivia bit her lip and endured it silently. Lucas worked methodically, his hands surprisingly gentle for a man who clearly spent his days at hard physical labor. "You've got at least a dozen cuts and blisters," he said finally. "Some are deep. How long were you walking?" "3 days," Olivia admitted. "My shoes weren't made for such travel." Lucas's expression darkened. 3 days, you must have been desperate to leave." "I was," she said simply. He didn't press for details, for which she was grateful. Instead, he retrieved a small tin from his saddlebag. "This is a salve the ranch cook makes. It's good for wounds, has honey and some herbs in it. It'll help with healing and keep infection away." The salve stung initially, but then brought blessed relief to her tortured feet. Lucas wrapped them in strips torn from a spare shirt, handling her feet with such care that Olivia found herself blinking back unexpected tears. "Thank you," she said when he had finished. "You're welcome." Lucas stood and moved to the creek, washing the blood from his hands. "Are you hungry?" "I've got some jerky and hardtack. Not much of a feast, but it'll keep you going." They ate in companionable silence as darkness fell completely, the fire casting dancing shadows across the small clearing. Despite her initial fears, Olivia found herself relaxing in Lucas's presence. There was something solid and reassuring about him, a steadiness that spoke of reliability and honor. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, partly out of genuine curiosity and partly to fill the silence that had begun to feel too intimate. Lucas looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "The double R. It's one of the biggest spreads in the territory, belongs to Richard and Rebecca Reynolds, good people who built it from nothing 20 years ago. I started there as a hand when I was 17, worked my way up to foreman over the last 10 years. You must enjoy the work to have stayed so long. A smile touched his lips. I do. There's something about watching the sun rise over land you helped tend, seeing calves you helped birth grow strong, knowing every hill and valley like the back of your hand. It gets in your blood. You sound like you belong there, Olivia observed. I hope to have my own place someday, Lucas admitted. I've been saving. Got my eye on a nice piece of land north of the Double R. Not big, but good water and enough grass to run a small herd. No wife to share it with. Olivia asked before she could stop herself. Lucas poked at the fire with a stick. Haven't found the right woman. Most ladies don't fancy the idea of being a rancher's wife. It's a hard life, isolated, full of work, and the winters can be brutal. Yet Mrs. Reynolds seems to have managed it. She's exceptional, Lucas agreed. Tough as old leather but kind where it counts. She was a schoolteacher in St. Louis before she came out here to marry Richard. Like the position you mentioned earlier, Lucas nodded. Similar, yes. The Double R has grown enough that several families live on the property now. They built a small schoolhouse 3 years ago. Olivia gazed into the fire, considering. A teaching position would be respectable and certainly preferable to working in a saloon. But it would mean staying in Wyoming Territory, close to where Arnold Weathers might find her. I should get some sleep, she said, changing the subject, if we're to reach Riverstone tomorrow. Lucas respected her withdrawal, standing and retrieving his bedroll. Take this. I'll be fine with my coat. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive for Olivia. She lay awake, watching the stars overhead and listening to the soft sounds of the prairie night, punctuated by the occasional stir of the fire as Lucas added another stick. She could see his silhouette across the flames, leaning against his saddle, hat pulled low over his eyes. He had kept his word about maintaining his distance, yet she felt oddly protected by his presence. In the early hours before dawn, she finally drifted into a restless sleep, only to be startled awake by the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet movement around the camp. Morning, Lucas greeted her, kneeling beside the fire where a small pot was beginning to boil. Hope I didn't wake you. Thought we might get an early start. Olivia sat up, wincing as the movement reminded her of her injured feet. Good morning. She tried to smooth her tangled hair, suddenly conscious of her appearance after days on the run. Lucas pretended not to notice her discomfort, busying himself with preparing a simple breakfast of coffee and the last of his provisions. How are your feet feeling? Better, Olivia said, though that wasn't entirely true. They still throbbed painfully, and she wasn't sure she could walk on them yet. Let me check the bandages before we head out, Lucas insisted, and once again he knelt before her to examine her feet. His frown told her everything she needed to know before he spoke. The bleeding stopped, but they're swollen and there's some redness around the deeper cuts. You shouldn't be walking on them yet. I don't have much choice, Olivia pointed out. Actually, you do, Lucas countered. You can ride Shadow all the way to Riverstone, or... He hesitated. You could consider coming back to the Double R with me. The doc there could treat your feet properly, and you'd have a safe place to rest while you decide what to do next. Olivia studied his face, looking for any sign of ulterior motives, but found only genuine concern. Still, caution made her hesitate. Why would you do that for a stranger? What's in it for you? Lucas stood, dusting off his hands. Maybe I'm just tired of seeing people hurt each other when a little kindness costs nothing. He turned away, beginning to pack up the camp. The offer stands. It's your decision. As they prepared to leave, Olivia found herself at a crossroads. Riverstone represented her original plan, a chance to earn money and return east, back to the familiar, if difficult, life she had left behind. The Double R was an unknown, but it offered immediate safety and the possibility of something she hadn't considered, a new beginning in this wild territory. "If I came to the Double R," she said slowly, "would there truly be a teaching position available to me?" Lucas looked up from securing his bedroll. "I can't promise it outright. The Reynoldses make those decisions, but I can promise you'd get fair consideration. They're good judges of character." Olivia glanced westward, toward Riverstone and the stagecoach that could take her away from this harsh land, then eastward, in the direction Lucas had indicated the ranch lay. "I'll come to the Double R," she decided finally, "but only until my feet are healed enough to travel. I'm not making any commitments beyond that." The smile that spread across Lucas's face was like the sunrise, warm and full of promise. "Fair enough. I think you'll find the Double R a good place to heal more than just your feet, Miss Zimmerman." He helped her onto the horse, and this time he mounted behind her, his arms encircling her waist as he took the reins. Olivia stiffened at the unfamiliar contact. "I apologize for the impropriety," Lucas said quietly, "but it's faster if we ride double and safer for you." Gradually, Olivia relaxed against him, the steady rhythm of the horse's movement and the solid presence at her back lulling her into a sense of security she had not felt since leaving Boston. They rode in comfortable silence for several miles, the landscape gradually changing from flat prairie to gently rolling hills dotted with scrubby juniper trees. "There it is," Lucas said finally, pointing to a cluster of buildings nestled in a wide valley below them. "The Double R." From their vantage point, Olivia could see a large main house built of sturdy logs, several barns and outbuildings, corrals filled with horses, and in the distance, the dark shapes of cattle grazing on green pastures. Smoke curled invitingly from the main house's chimney, and even from here, she could sense an order and prosperity to the place that spoke of careful stewardship. "It's larger than I expected," she admitted. "The Reynoldses started with nothing but a claim and a dream," Lucas said, pride evident in his voice. "Now they run 5,000 head of cattle and employ 20 full-time hands. That small building to the left of the main house is the schoolhouse I mentioned." As they descended into the valley, Olivia's anxiety returned. What would these people think of her, arriving uninvited and in such a bedraggled state? Would they welcome a strange woman brought in by their foreman, or would they see her as an unwanted burden? They were halfway down the slope when a rider emerged from one of the barns and spotted them. He raised a hand in greeting before turning his horse and galloping toward the main house, clearly carrying news of their approach. By the time they reached the yard, a small welcoming committee had formed. A tall, silver-haired man with a weathered face and piercing eyes that missed nothing. A woman of similar age, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a practical dress and a concerned expression, and a younger man who bore enough resemblance to the older couple to be clearly identified as their son. Lucas drew Shadow to a halt and dismounted, then reached up to help Olivia down. When her feet touched the ground, pain shot through her legs, and she would have fallen if Lucas hadn't caught her, one arm around her waist. "Lucas, who do we have here?" the older woman asked, stepping forward with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is Miss Olivia Zimmerman. I found her yesterday about 25 miles west. She's in need of medical attention and a safe place to stay for a while." The slight emphasis on the word safe wasn't lost on anyone present. Rebecca Reynolds's eyes softened as she took in Olivia's condition. "You poor dear. You look half-starved and completely exhausted. James," she turned to the younger man, "fetch Dr. Mitchell." and have Martha prepare a hot bath and some clean clothes. She approached Olivia and gently took her arm. "Come inside, Miss Zimmerman. Whatever trouble you're running from can wait until you're properly cared for." The directness of her assessment startled Olivia, but there was nothing but kindness in the older woman's manner. She allowed herself to be led toward the house, Lucas supporting her other side. "Richard," Rebecca called over her shoulder to her husband, "have one of the hands take care of Lucas's horse and then join us inside. I think we all need to hear this story." The interior of the Reynolds home was a revelation to Olivia. She had expected frontier austerity, but while the furnishings were practical, they were also comfortable and spoke of refinement. Polished wooden floors, a large stone fireplace, chairs upholstered in good fabric, and shelves lined with books created an atmosphere of civilized comfort that seemed almost miraculous after her days on the run. Rebecca settled Olivia in a cushioned chair near the fire and instructed a maid to bring tea and something to eat. "Now, dear, while we wait for the doctor, perhaps you could tell us how you came to be wandering the prairie alone." Under the sympathetic gaze of Rebecca Reynolds, the whole story spilled out of Olivia: her parents' deaths, the struggle to survive in Boston, the allure of Arnold Weathers' advertisement, her journey west full of hope, and the crushing reality of what awaited her. "He seemed so respectable in his letters," Olivia explained, her hands clutching the teacup Rebecca had given her. "He wrote of a comfortable home, a prosperous ranch, and a desire for a cultured wife to share his life. The reality was a run-down shack, a few scraggly cattle, and a man who—" She swallowed hard, "who saw a wife as property to be used and disciplined as he saw fit." Rebecca's expression hardened. "Arnold Weathers," she repeated, exchanging a meaningful look with her husband, who had joined them midway through Olivia's tale. "Richard, isn't he that fellow from over by Snake Creek who tried to sell us those sickly horses last year?" Richard nodded grimly. "The same. Always struck me as a man not to be trusted. Now I know why." He turned to Olivia. "Miss Zimmerman, you were right to leave. No woman should endure such treatment. But I'm concerned," Rebecca added. "If he paid for your passage west, he may feel entitled to find you. These mail-order arrangements sometimes have legal complications." "I signed no papers," Olivia assured her. "The agreement was informal, his advertisement, my reply, and the money he sent for my travel. There was no contract." "That's fortunate," Richard said. "Still, a man like that might not be deterred by legal niceties." He glanced at Lucas, who had remained standing quietly near the door. "We'll need to keep an eye out. If he comes looking, he'll likely check Riverstone first, but he might eventually make his way here." "He won't touch her," Lucas said, his voice quiet but firm. A knock at the door interrupted them, and James returned with a middle-aged man carrying a doctor's bag. Introductions were made, and Dr. Mitchell immediately set to examining Olivia's feet with professional detachment. "These are nasty wounds, young lady," he pronounced after unwrapping Lucas's bandages. "Your lucky infection hasn't set in too deeply. I'll clean them properly and apply a better dressing, but you'll need to stay off them for at least a week, preferably 2. 2 weeks, Olivia protested. "I can't impose on the Reynoldses' hospitality for so long." "Nonsense," Rebecca declared. "You'll stay as long as necessary." "In fact," she continued, a thoughtful expression crossing her face, "Lucas mentioned you might be interested in our teaching position." Olivia glanced at Lucas, who gave her an encouraging nod. I have no formal training as a teacher," she admitted. "I can read and write well, and I know basic arithmetic, but can you manage a room full of children ranging from 5 to 15? Richard asked bluntly. "Some eager to learn, others who'd rather be anywhere else. Can you be firm when needed but patient with those who struggle? Olivia considered the question honestly. I believe I can. In Boston, I helped care for the younger children in our building while their parents worked. I enjoyed teaching them their letters and sums. Rebecca smiled. Then you're already ahead of our last two teachers. The position includes room and board here at the main house, a small salary, and most importantly, the respect of the community. It would give you time to decide if Wyoming Territory could be your home, or save enough to return east if that's your preference. The offer was more generous than anything Olivia could have hoped for. Still, caution made her hesitate. And if Mr. Weathers comes looking for me, Richard's expression hardened. Then he'll have to deal with every man on the double R. We protect our own, Miss Zimmerman. Consider the offer, Rebecca suggested, rising to her feet. You don't need to decide immediately. For now, let's get you that bath and some proper food. You look dead on your feet, no pun intended, she added with a gentle smile. The next few days passed in a haze of recovery for Olivia. True to Rebecca's word, she was given a comfortable room in the main house, clean clothes, regular meals, and strict instructions to rest. Dr. Mitchell visited daily to check her feet, and by the end of the first week, the swelling had subsided, and the wounds were beginning to heal cleanly. During this time, Olivia had the opportunity to observe life at the double R. Rebecca Reynolds ran the household with quiet efficiency, overseeing the cooking, cleaning, and other domestic matters while also keeping the ranch's books and correspondence. Richard focused on the business aspects: cattle sales, land management, and negotiations with buyers and sellers. Their son James, in his mid-20s, was learning all aspects of the operation, clearly being groomed to take over eventually. And then there was Lucas. As foreman, he seemed to be everywhere at once, directing the ranch hands, inspecting the herds, repairing equipment, and planning the day's work. Yet somehow, he always found time to stop by the house, ostensibly to report to Richard, but inevitably ending up spending a few minutes in conversation with Olivia. These visits became the highlight of her days. Lucas brought news of the outside world, funny stories about the ranch hands' antics, and occasionally small gifts: a wildflower he had spotted on his rounds, a particularly interesting rock, or once, a small carved wooden horse that he admitted somewhat sheepishly to having made himself during the evenings. "You're very talented," Olivia said, examining the delicate carving. "The detail in the mane and tail is remarkable." Lucas ducked his head, embarrassed by the praise. "My father taught me. He was a carpenter before he tried his hand at ranching. Didn't have much luck with cattle, but he could make just about anything from wood." "Where is your family now?" Olivia asked, realizing she knew very little about his background. A shadow crossed Lucas's face. "Gone. Influenza took my parents and younger sister the winter I turned 16. I worked odd jobs for a year before finding my way to the double R." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly, understanding all too well the pain of losing family. "It was a long time ago," Lucas replied, though his eyes still held a trace of old grief. "The Reynoldses have been like family since. Richard taught me everything I know about ranching." As the days passed, Olivia found herself drawn more and more to this quiet, steady man. Unlike Arnold Weathers, whose charm had masked a cruel nature, Lucas's somewhat reserved exterior hid a depth of kindness and integrity that revealed itself in his actions rather than his words. He was respected by the other ranch hands not because they feared him, but because he never asked of them anything he wouldn't do himself. By the beginning of her second week at the double R, Olivia had made her decision. When Rebecca broached the subject of the teaching position again over breakfast, Olivia accepted gratefully. "I'd like to try, at least," she said. "I can't promise I'll be good at it, but I'll do my very best." Rebecca beamed. "Excellent. The children will be delighted. Our current teacher, Miss Harding, can show you her methods before she leaves at the end of the month. The school term starts again in 2 weeks, which should give your feet plenty of time to heal completely." Later that day, with Dr. Mitchell's permission, Olivia took her first tentative steps outside. She made her way slowly to a bench in the small garden Rebecca maintained beside the house, reveling in the fresh air and sunshine after days confined indoors. She was so absorbed in watching a hummingbird flit among the flowers that she didn't notice Lucas approaching until he spoke. "It's good to see you up and about, Miss Zimmerman." Olivia started slightly, then smiled up at him. "Dr. Mitchell finally declared me fit for short walks. And please, after all you've done for me, I think you might call me Olivia." Lucas smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Olivia, then, and I'm just Lucas. Mr. Irwin makes me feel like I should be looking over my shoulder for my father." He sat beside her on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. "Mrs. Reynolds tells me you've accepted the teaching position." Olivia nodded. "I have. It seems like a good opportunity, and I'm grateful for it." She hesitated, then added, "I never properly thanked you, Lucas. If you hadn't found me that day." "But I did find you," he interrupted gently, "and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who had both known loss and found strength in its wake. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken emotions, until Lucas cleared his throat and looked away. "I should get back to work," he said, rising reluctantly. "The men are branding calves in the south pasture today, and it's always a chaotic business." "Of course," Olivia replied, feeling strangely bereft as he stepped away. "Will I see you at supper?" Lucas nodded. "I usually eat with the Reynoldses when we're not on the trail. Until then, Olivia." As he walked away, Olivia realized with a start that sometime during the past week, her plans had shifted. The idea of returning east no longer held the same appeal. Instead, she found herself imagining a future here at the Double R, teaching the ranchers' children, becoming part of this community, and perhaps. She cut off that line of thinking. It was too soon to be considering such possibilities, especially with a man she had known for such a short time. Yet she couldn't deny the quickening of her pulse whenever Lucas was near, or the way his rare smiles seemed to illuminate something long dormant within her. The next week passed in a whirl of activity as Olivia prepared to take on her new role. Miss Harding, a pleasant young woman eager to begin her married life, showed her the schoolhouse, introduced her to the dozen children who would be her pupils, and shared her teaching materials and methods. "Don't let the Thompson boys intimidate you," Miss Harding advised. "They talk big, but they're good-hearted underneath all that bluster. And little Mary Carson is shy as a field mouse, but if you can draw her out, you'll find she's remarkably bright." Olivia absorbed everything eagerly, making notes and plans, determined to prove worthy of the trust the Reynoldses had placed in her. When she wasn't at the schoolhouse, she helped Rebecca with household tasks, insisting on earning her keep even before her official duties began. Throughout this time, her friendship with Lucas continued to deepen. He began to escort her on longer walks as her feet healed, showing her the ranch and telling her stories of its history. Sometimes they rode together, Lucas teaching her to handle a gentle mare named Daisy that Rebecca used for light travel. It was during one of these rides, about 3 weeks after her arrival at the Double R, that Lucas brought up the subject of Arnold Weathers. "There's been word from Riverstone," he said as they let their horses drink from a small stream. "A man matching Weathers's description has been asking about a young woman from the east. He's been to every ranch and homestead within 20 miles of the town. Olivia's hand tightened on Daisy's reins. He's looking for me. Yes, Lucas confirmed, but he doesn't know you're here yet. The Reynoldses are well respected, and no one who's heard the story of how you came to be at the Double R would willingly send Weathers in your direction. Yet he'll eventually work his way here, Olivia said, fear coiling in her stomach. What then? Lucas's expression was resolute. Then he'll find that you're under the protection of the Double R. Richard has already spoken to Sheriff Taylor in Riverstone, making it clear that you left Weathers of your own free will and have established yourself here legally. Will that be enough to stop him? Olivia asked doubtfully. If not, there are other measures, Lucas assured her, his hand unconsciously moving to the pistol at his hip. But I don't think it will come to that. Men like Weathers are usually cowards at heart. Once he realizes you're not alone and defenseless, he'll likely move on. Olivia wanted to believe him, but the memory of Weathers's rage was still too fresh. She had seen the violence he was capable of, and the thought of him bringing that violence to the peaceful Double R filled her with dread. I don't want to bring trouble to the Reynoldses after all their kindness, she said quietly. Perhaps I should leave, go somewhere he wouldn't think to look. Lucas turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense. Running isn't the answer, Olivia. You deserve to build a life where you choose, not be driven from place to place by fear of that man. He reached out hesitantly, then took her hand in his. Besides, I've grown rather fond of having you here. The simple touch and honest words sent warmth spreading through Olivia's chest. I've grown fond of being here, she admitted. More than I expected to. They gazed at each other for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Then, slowly, Lucas leaned forward. Olivia's breath caught as his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. It was brief, just the softest press of his mouth against hers, but it changed everything. I shouldn't have done that, Lucas said as he pulled back, though he didn't look particularly regretful. It was presumptuous. Yes, it was, Olivia agreed, her lips tingling. Then she smiled. But I'm glad you did. The smile that spread across Lucas's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. He kept hold of her hand as they mounted their horses and rode back to the ranch, both of them aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. That evening at supper, Rebecca gave Olivia a knowing look, but said nothing about the change in her relationship with Lucas. Instead, she announced that the ranch would be holding a social gathering the following weekend to officially welcome Olivia as the new teacher and bid farewell to Miss Harding. All the families with children at the school will attend, Rebecca explained. It's important for them to meet you in a social setting before classes begin. And, she added with a twinkle in her eye, it's a good opportunity for you to become better acquainted with the community. The social gathering became the focus of much preparation over the next few days. Rebecca and the household staff baked pies and cakes, cleaned the large barn where the event would be held, and arranged for music and dancing. Olivia was fitted for a new dress from fabric Rebecca had in her sewing room, a pretty blue calico that matched her eyes. Every new teacher needs at least one good dress, Rebecca insisted when Olivia protested the expense. Consider it part of your employment. The night of the social arrived clear and mild, with a full moon illuminating the ranch yard. Lanterns had been strung throughout the barn, tables set up for food and drink, and a small stage erected for the three-man band: a fiddler, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica. Families began arriving early, bringing additional dishes to share. Olivia stood beside Rebecca, being introduced to parents and children, trying to memorize names and faces as they came through the barn doors. The women were friendly, if somewhat reserved, clearly taking her measure while the men were politely deferential, many of them ranch hands who worked under Lucas's direction. Lucas himself had been busy helping set up the barn and only appeared as the music began. He had cleaned up for the occasion, wearing a freshly pressed shirt, his dark hair still damp from washing. When his eyes found Olivia in her new blue dress, his appreciative gaze sent a flush to her cheeks. He made his way to her side, nodding greetings to the various ranch families as he passed. "You look beautiful," he said quietly when he reached her. "Blue suits you." "Thank you," Olivia replied, suddenly shy. "You clean up rather nicely yourself." "Miss Zimmerman," Richard Reynolds called, approaching with a portly, well-dressed man. "Allow me to introduce Judge Wilson from Riverstone. He serves on the school board that oversees all the schools in the county." Olivia shook hands with the judge, answering his questions about her background and educational philosophy with growing confidence. It was only as their conversation was concluding that she noticed a disturbance at the barn entrance. A man stood framed in the doorway, his stocky figure silhouetted against the night sky. Even from a distance, Olivia recognized the swagger in his stance, the set of his shoulders. Arnold Weathers had found her. Fear froze her in place as Weathers scanned the crowd, clearly searching for her. When his bloodshot eyes finally locked on hers, a triumphant sneer spread across his face, and he began pushing his way through the gathered families. "There you are, wife," he called, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed barn. "Time to come home where you belong." Lucas was at Olivia's side in an instant, his hand at her elbow, steadying her. "Stay here," he murmured. Then he stepped forward, placing himself between Olivia and the approaching Weathers. "That's far enough," Lucas said, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable note of authority. "Miss Zimmerman isn't going anywhere with you." Weathers halted, his gaze flicking from Lucas to Richard Reynolds, who had moved to stand beside his foreman. "This is between me and my wife," he growled. "Don't interfere in a man's domestic affairs." "She's not your wife," Richard said calmly. "No marriage took place, and Miss Zimmerman is employed here at the Double R as our schoolteacher." Weathers's face flushed with anger. "I paid good money to bring her out here. She can't just run off and take up with another man." He jabbed a finger toward Lucas. "I've heard about you two riding all over the countryside together." Judge Wilson stepped forward, his judicial presence adding weight to the confrontation. "Mr. Weathers, I presume. I understand there was no legal marriage contract between you and Miss Zimmerman. Is that correct?" "We had an agreement," Weathers insisted. "I sent her the money for her passage. Did you have a marriage license? Were vows exchanged before a minister or justice of the peace?" the judge pressed. Weathers shifted uncomfortably. "Wasn't time for all that. She only just arrived when she ran off." "Then legally, she is under no obligation to you," Judge Wilson declared. "The money you provided was a gift, not a purchase price. Miss Zimmerman is a free woman, entitled to make her own choices." Olivia found her voice at last, stepping out from behind Lucas despite his protective gesture. "I left because you beat me," she said clearly, her voice carrying in the silent barn. "Because you lied about who you were and what you offered. I owe you nothing, Mr. Weathers, and I will never return to your home." A murmur ran through the crowd at her words. Several of the ranch hands moved closer, forming a loose circle around Weathers, their expressions grim. Weathers's hand moved toward his holster, but before he could draw, Lucas had his own pistol out and leveled at the man's chest. "I wouldn't," Lucas said quietly. "There are 20 armed men in this barn who would be happy for an excuse to put a bullet in you. Walk away now, and you can leave in one piece." For a tense moment, Weathers's hand hovered near his gun. His eyes darted around, taking in the hostile faces surrounding him. Finally, with a curse, he let his hand drop. She ain't worth the trouble anyway, he spat. Frigid eastern bitch. Several men moved forward at the insult, but Lucas held up his free hand, stopping them. You've said your piece. Now leave and don't come back to Double R land. Ever. Weathers glared at Olivia one last time. You'll regret this. Both of you. Then he turned and stalked out of the barn, his boot heels striking the wooden floor with angry emphasis. The tension in the barn dissipated slowly as several ranch hands followed Weathers out to ensure he actually left the property. The band, sensing the need to restore the festive atmosphere, struck up a lively tune, and gradually, conversation resumed. Lucas holstered his pistol and turned to Olivia, concern etched on his features. Are you all right? Olivia nodded, though she was trembling slightly. Yes, I think so. I just need a moment. Rebecca appeared at her side. Come, dear, let's step outside for some fresh air. She led Olivia through a side door into the quiet yard, where the cool night air helped calm her racing pulse. I'm sorry, Olivia said once they were alone. I've ruined your social. Nonsense, Rebecca replied firmly. You've done nothing wrong. That man is the one who should be ashamed, causing a scene like that. She patted Olivia's hand. Besides, nothing brings a community together like standing against a common enemy. I dare say you've earned more respect from these families tonight than you could have in months of teaching. The door opened behind them and Lucas stepped out. He's gone, he reported. Tom and Charlie rode with him to the property line to make sure he left. Judge Wilson says if he comes back, we can have him arrested for trespassing and disturbing the peace. Do you think he will come back? Olivia asked worriedly. Lucas's expression was grim. Men like that don't like to lose face, but he'd be a fool to try anything against the entire Double R. Nevertheless, Rebecca said, I think it would be wise if Olivia wasn't alone for the next few weeks, especially when traveling between the main house and the schoolhouse. She gave Lucas a meaningful look. Perhaps you could arrange an escort schedule among the men, Lucas nodded. Already done. And I've assigned 2 hands to patrol the boundaries nearest to Weathers's property. He turned to Olivia. He won't get to you again, I promise. The sincerity in his voice warmed Olivia, pushing back the cold fear that Weathers's appearance had brought. She smiled gratefully at both of them. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without all of you. You're one of us now, Rebecca said simply, and we take care of our own. They returned to the social, where Olivia was surprised to find herself surrounded by supportive women and protective men, all eager to assure her of their backing. The children, sensing something important had happened but not fully understanding it, were simply happy when the dancing resumed. Lucas claimed Olivia for the first dance, a lively reel that left them both breathless and laughing. As the evening progressed, she danced with Richard, Judge Wilson, and several of the ranch hands, but always found her way back to Lucas for the slower tunes. During one such dance, with his hand warm at her waist and her cheek nearly touching his shoulder, Lucas murmured, I meant what I said before. Weathers won't touch you again. Olivia looked up into his earnest blue eyes. I believe you. But I don't want you putting yourself in danger because of me. Some things are worth the risk, Lucas replied softly. His gaze dropped to her lips, and for a moment, Olivia thought he might kiss her right there on the dance floor. Instead, he twirled her in a gentle turn, continuing their dance among the other couples. The weeks following the social were busy ones for Olivia. School began, and she threw herself into teaching with enthusiasm that quickly won over even the most reluctant students. The Thompson boys, despite Miss Harding's warnings, proved to be bright and engaged when given challenging material, and shy Mary Carson blossomed under Olivia's gentle encouragement. Lucas made a point of escorting her to and from the schoolhouse each day. though as time passed and there was no sign of Arnold Weathers, the other ranch hands assigned to protection duty were gradually reassigned to regular work. Still, no one believed the threat was entirely gone, and Olivia never quite lost the habit of glancing over her shoulder when outside alone. As autumn deepened toward winter, life at the Double R fell into a pleasant routine. Olivia taught during the day, helped Rebecca with household matters in the evenings, and spent as much time as possible with Lucas during his free hours. Their relationship grew steadily, built on mutual respect, shared laughter, and increasingly frequent moments of tenderness. It was on a crisp November afternoon, with the first snow of the season dusting the distant mountains, that Lucas took Olivia riding to his favorite spot on the ranch, a high meadow overlooking the valley, where the Double R spread out below them like a painting. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, gazing at the panorama. "You can see everything from here." "This is where I come when I need to think," Lucas admitted, helping her down from Daisy, "or when I need to make important decisions." Something in his tone made Olivia look at him more closely. "And what decision brings us here today?" Lucas took both her hands in his expression unusually solemn. "Olivia, I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but these past months have been the happiest of my life. I've watched you overcome fear, build a new life, and touch the hearts of everyone at the Double R, especially mine." Olivia's heart began to race as she realized where this conversation was heading. "Lucas, please, let me finish before I lose my courage," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "I've saved enough for that piece of land I told you about, the one north of here. Richard has agreed to let me buy it from him at a fair price and to help me establish my own small herd. It's not much yet, just 100 acres and a simple cabin, but it could be a start. For us." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box, clearly handmade, with intricate carvings decorating its surface. When he opened it, a simple gold band nestled inside. "Olivia Zimmerman, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of building a life with me here in Wyoming Territory? I promise to cherish you, protect you, and walk beside you through whatever comes, for all the days of my life." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes as emotion overwhelmed her. 6 months ago, she had been running for her life, her feet bleeding and her heart full of fear and disillusionment. Now she stood on a mountain meadow with a man who had quite literally met her halfway, who had earned her trust through actions rather than words, and who was offering her not just his heart but a true partnership. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Lucas, I will marry you." His face lit with joy as he slid the ring onto her finger. It was slightly large, but that hardly mattered as he drew her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, both were laughing and crying at once. "I'll have the ring sized properly in Riverstone," Lucas promised, "and we can be married whenever you're ready, tomorrow or next year. It's your decision." Olivia touched his cheek gently. "Not tomorrow, but not next year either. Perhaps after Christmas. That would give us time to prepare and for you to get the cabin ready." Lucas nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Christmas it is. Though I should warn you, winters are harsh here. The cabin is solid but small and will likely be snowed in for days at a time." "That doesn't sound so terrible," Olivia replied with a smile. "As long as we're together." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, their horses walking close beside each other. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the Double R, met with congratulations and knowing smiles from those who had watched their relationship blossom. Rebecca was particularly delighted, embracing Olivia warmly. "I had hoped for this from the moment Lucas brought you here," she confessed. "You've brought a light back to his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Richard was more practical but equally approving. "Lucas is the finest man I know, besides my own son. He'll make you a good husband, and you'll be a strength to him as he builds his own ranch. And," he added with a twinkle in his eye, "the double R will still benefit from your teaching. We're not letting you go entirely." The weeks leading up to Christmas were a flurry of preparations. Lucas spent every available moment working on the cabin, adding a second room, installing glass windows ordered from Riverstone, and building furniture with his skilled hands. Olivia divided her time between teaching, helping Rebecca with Christmas preparations, and assembling the items she would need for her new home. News came from Riverstone that Arnold Weathers had sold his meager property and moved further west, apparently giving up his pursuit of Olivia. While this brought relief, Lucas and Richard maintained a cautious vigilance, unwilling to fully trust that Weathers would stay gone. As the wedding day approached, snow blanketed the land, transforming the double R into a winter wonderland. The date was set for December 23rd, allowing the ranch to celebrate both the wedding and Christmas in one festive weekend. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold, the sun sparkling off the snow-covered landscape. Rebecca had transformed the main house for the occasion, decorating with pine boughs, red ribbons, and candles that filled the rooms with a warm glow. The ranch hands had cleared paths between all the buildings and constructed temporary benches in the large front room where the ceremony would take place. Upstairs, Olivia prepared with Rebecca and several of the ranch wives who had become friends over the past months. Her wedding dress, made by Rebecca's skilled hands, was of ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs, simple but elegant, and far more beautiful than anything Olivia could have imagined for herself when she'd first arrived at the double R. "Something borrowed," Rebecca said, fastening a pearl necklace around Olivia's neck. "I wore these at my own wedding 30 years ago. They're beautiful," Olivia said, touching the cool pearls with trembling fingers. "Thank you." "And something blue," added Mary Thompson, one of the ranch wives, presenting Olivia with a delicate blue handkerchief embroidered with her new initials. Tears threatened again as Olivia accepted the thoughtful gift. "You've all been so kind. I never expected to find such friendship here." "You earned it," Rebecca said firmly. "Now, are you ready to become Mrs. Lucas Irwin?" Olivia nodded, her heart too full for words. Downstairs, the main room was packed with every resident of the double R and many from neighboring ranches. Lucas stood at the front beside the minister who had ridden in from Riverstone, looking handsome in a new black suit, his normally unruly dark hair carefully combed. His eyes, when they found Olivia at the top of the stairs, filled with such love and pride that she nearly forgot to breathe. Richard escorted her down the stairs and through the crowded room. "I know I'm not your father," he whispered as they walked, "but I'm honored to give you away today. You've become like a daughter to Rebecca and me." "Thank you," Olivia whispered back, "for everything." When they reached Lucas, Richard placed her hand in his with a solemn nod, then stepped back to join Rebecca. The minister began the ceremony, but Olivia barely heard the words, so focused was she on Lucas, on the warmth of his hand holding hers, the love shining in his blue eyes, the slight tremor in his voice as he repeated his vows. "I, Lucas James Irwin, take you, Olivia Grace Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." When it was her turn, Olivia spoke clearly, her voice steady despite the emotion welling within her. "I, Olivia Grace Zimmerman, take you, Lucas James Irwin, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. The exchange of rings, Lucas's a simple gold band that matched hers, and the minister's pronouncement that they were husband and wife seemed to happen in a dream. Then Lucas was kissing her, his lips warm and gentle against hers, and the room erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration that followed was the most joyous the Double R had seen in years. Tables laden with food, music from the same band that had played at the social, and dancing that continued well into the evening. Olivia moved through it all in a state of euphoric disbelief, accepting congratulations, dancing with her new husband, and occasionally catching Rebecca's eye across the room, receiving an approving nod from the woman who had become a mother figure to her. As the party began to wind down, Lucas drew Olivia aside. "The wagon is packed and ready," he murmured. "Shall we make our escape before they decide to serenade us all night?" Olivia nodded, suddenly shy at the thought of what awaited them. They slipped away to change into traveling clothes, then made their farewells amid good-natured teasing and heartfelt well-wishes. The night was clear and cold, stars glittering overhead as Lucas helped Olivia into the wagon and tucked warm buffalo robes around her. The drive to their new home would take less than an hour, but in the winter cold, every precaution was necessary. As they pulled away from the main house, Olivia looked back at the glowing windows, the silhouettes of those who had become her family waving from the porch. Then she turned to Lucas, her husband, and saw in his face all the promise of their future together. "Are you happy?" he asked softly as they drove through the moonlit landscape. "More than I ever thought possible," Olivia answered truthfully. "When I ran from Arnold Weathers, I thought I was running away from something. I never imagined I was running toward the greatest happiness of my life." Lucas reached across to take her hand, his touch warm even through her gloves. "I thank God every day that I found you on that prairie." "Or perhaps you found me. We found each other," Olivia corrected gently. "And neither of us will ever have to look back." The cabin, when they reached it, was a revelation. Lucas had described it as small and simple, but he had transformed it with his skilled hands into a cozy, inviting home. A fire was already burning in the stone fireplace, lit by one of the ranch hands sent ahead, casting a warm glow over the main room with its polished wooden floor, comfortable chairs, and bookshelves built into one wall. "Lucas, it's beautiful," Olivia breathed as he carried her across the threshold. "It's not the home you had in Boston," he said, setting her gently on her feet but keeping his arms around her. "But I hope it will make you happy." "My home is wherever you are," Olivia replied, reaching up to touch his cheek. "This is just the beginning of our story." In the firelight, with snow falling gently outside the windows and the promise of a lifetime together before them, Lucas lowered his mouth to hers in a kiss that sealed their bond, a bond forged in the crucible of hardship and tempered by love, stronger than any adversity that might lie ahead. 5 years later, spring 1884, Olivia stood on the porch of what was now the Irwin Ranch, watching her husband return from the south pasture with their 3-year-old son perched in front of him on the saddle. Little Thomas was the image of his father, with the same dark hair and serious expression, though he had inherited Olivia's green eyes. "Mama," Thomas called, waving excitedly as they approached. "Papa showed me the new calves, did he now?" Olivia replied, smiling as Lucas lifted their son from the horse and set him on his feet. The boy immediately ran to her, wrapping his arms around her legs. "They're so small," Thomas reported earnestly, "but Papa says they'll grow big like the other cows." "Your Papa is right about that," Olivia agreed, ruffling his hair. "Now go wash up for supper. Sarah has been asking for you." At the mention of his 1-year-old sister, Thomas dashed inside, all thoughts of calves momentarily forgotten. Olivia turned to Lucas, who had dismounted and was removing his hat as he climbed the porch steps. "Successful round?" she asked, stepping into his embrace. "Very," Lucas confirmed, dropping a kiss on her forehead. 20 new calves this week alone. If the weather holds, we'll have the best herd yet this fall." In the 5 years since their wedding, the Irwin ranch had grown steadily. What had begun as 100 acres and a small cabin was now 500 acres with a proper ranch house, 2 barns, and a herd of 300 cattle. Lucas's hard work and sound management, combined with the continued support and advice of Richard Reynolds, had built a prosperous operation that was becoming known throughout the territory for its quality stock. Olivia had continued teaching at the Double R schoolhouse for the first 2 years of their marriage, riding the 3 miles each way daily, until Thomas's birth made it impractical. Now she managed their home, helped with the ranch accounts, and cared for their children, though she still occasionally substituted when the current teacher needed time away. Life wasn't always easy. The Wyoming winters were as harsh as Lucas had warned, and there had been setbacks, a particularly severe blizzard their 2nd year that claimed 20 head of cattle, a fire in one of the barns that Lucas had barely escaped while saving their horses, and the constant challenges of building a ranch from the ground up. But through it all, their love had only deepened. Each challenge faced together had strengthened their bond, each joy shared had multiplied its sweetness. The fear and loneliness that had marked Olivia's arrival in Wyoming Territory were distant memories, replaced by the security of Lucas's steadfast love and the happiness of the family they had created together. "Rebecca sent word that they're expecting us for Sunday dinner," Olivia said as they entered the house together. "James and his wife will be there with their new baby." Lucas smiled. "I'd like that. It's been too long since we visited the Double R." Though they lived independently now, the connection to the Reynolds family remained strong. Richard and Rebecca had become grandparents to their children, and the support between the 2 ranches continued unabated. As they moved into the warm kitchen where Sarah sat in her high chair, banging a wooden spoon happily while their housekeeper, Mrs. Peterson, prepared supper, Lucas's arm tightened around Olivia's waist. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying in Wyoming? Marrying a simple rancher instead of returning to Boston?" Olivia looked up at him, this man who had found her at her lowest moment and helped her build a life better than any she could have imagined. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment." Lucas's smile was all the response she needed. As Thomas ran back into the room, clean-faced and chattering about his adventures, and Sarah reached out her chubby arms for her father, Olivia felt the familiar wave of gratitude wash over her. From the desperate flight that had left her feet bleeding on the prairie to this moment of domestic contentment, every step of her journey had led her here to a home filled with love, to a husband who had truly met her halfway, and to a life neither of them would ever look back from. In that moment, surrounded by her family in the home they had built together, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that sometimes running away was really running toward exactly where you were meant to be all along.